Welcome, Diane Miller, to the Wellness Law Podcast, where wellness and the law meet. Thank you so much for being my very first guest on the podcast. And I hope that this podcast brings a lot of information and useful insight for my audience, who should be people in the wellness arena in different capacities, people who are practitioners, maybe licensed or unlicensed, people who are in companies that are developing wellness products or services and servicing different clients for wellness. And of course, people just interested in wellness generally. And so my first guest, as I mentioned, is Diane Miller. She is the founder and currently program director for the National Health Freedom Coalition. They're based in Minnesota, which is just in my backyard here in Wisconsin. And Diane, how long have you been involved with the National Health Freedom Coalition? When did it start?
We founded it in the year 2000.
Okay, so 22 years. Yeah. Wow, it's a long time. And we're going to get into what that coalition does. So Diane is also, I should point out, a lawyer. So very, very appropriate for this podcast, Wellness Law Podcast. And how long have you been a lawyer, Diane?
We just had our 30-something reunion.
Okay, a long time.
A long time.
So why don't we first start out with, what is the National Health Freedom Coalition, your current place of employment and the organization that you helped found?
Well, we have a mission that we would like all people to be able to have access to whatever they need to get better in their own determination, not in someone else's decision. So if someone is on a healing journey and they want to have access to things, we think that they should have access to them. And that, of course, brings us into the arena of, hey, are there holistic doctors? Are there herbalists? Are there homeopaths that I can go to? How can I get well? And also freedom of information on unconventional things, as well as conventional things. And then really the core foundational principle that people make their own medical decisions.
Mm-hmm. And so I assume you founded this because you felt that the current system wasn't conducive to as much choice as you would like to see it. And I read a little bit about you on your website, the National Health Freedom Coalition website, and it sounded like this whole concept for this organization, which is a nonprofit, correct?
Right.
501c3, started with a case that you worked on way back
Right.
when, called State v. Saunders. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that case and why it led to creating the National Health Freedom Coalition?
Sure, that'd be great. I was just a fresh out attorney, and another attorney called me, and I have a medical technology hematology background before I became an attorney, and they were looking for someone to read the medical records of a case. And I said, what's the case? And they said, there's a farmer who's been charged criminally with practicing medicine without a license because he cured a congressman.
A farmer?
What was going on there? And the farmer was a dairy farmer, and he had learned how to strengthen the immune strength of the colostrum from his herd of cattle. And the colostrum that he would customize for the patient or the client would get them better from all kinds of things: Lyme disease, cancer, hematological problems. And so I was like, how is he doing this? Because I was raised on a farm, and I have a chemistry medical technology degree. And I was like, how is this happening? And I read the medical records where people were getting better from terminal illnesses. And I was like, wow. And then I went, well, why would they shut him down if nobody got hurt and he was making people better? And then I read the definition of the practice of medicine. and it said, everything you do to heal another person is the practice of medicine
Mhm.
under the law. And if you heal another person, you could go to jail. And I went, what?
So this was the state licensing board who,
No, it was just, well, actually, yes, that law is inside of the Medical Practice Act for licensing doctors,
in what state was this?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay.
So then I researched the law, and in many of the licensing regulations for all of the different licensing boards, there's a very broad definition of what they do. And then they say, and if you do these things without a license, you are a criminal. And so I was very like, wow, what about regular people? What about herbalists? What about homeopaths? What about my Qigong master? What about, whatever? And so I was like, why don't they have an exemption for all of these unlicensed people? And then I looked in other states, and that law is on the books in almost every state.
Mhm.
And so I went, oh, so in the case, we had experts from some of the most world-renowned experts on immunology to say that these people really did get better. And the evidence, they wouldn't let the evidence in about whether they got better or not. They would only let the evidence in about whether he was practicing medicine. And if he was healing another person, he was practicing medicine. And I went, wow. So they blocked our evidence. We got 2 hung juries because the jury looked at the law and said, anybody who heals another person would be a crime. I don't want to put this person in jail.
Mhm.
And like if one of the jury persons was a teacher and said, if I put a bandage on someone's knee, I'm going to jail. I'm not going to convict this person. So we got 2 hung juries. After 4 years of trial, the case was dismissed, but the law was still on the books. So I just was like, wow, we have to change that law and get an exemption. So a group of us in Minnesota went to the legislature and learned how to lobby and write laws. And it took us a couple of years, 3 years to get it all together. And then we passed Minnesota 146A, protecting all the unlicensed healers from criminal charges of practice of medicine. So that led to, like everybody in the country wanted to do the same thing. And we got all these telephone calls. And I said, sure, I'd love to do this for my living. And because I was so committed to it. And so I started a national organization with 2 of the Minnesota leaders. And we've been going for 22 years, and we've gone into many areas of health freedom, obviously, not just the unlicensed practice safe harbor laws in many states. We have helped pass 11 states safe harbor laws. And we have gotten involved in the dietary supplement protection. We have been to Codex United Nations meeting in Italy and Switzerland. We have now we started a lobbying organization as a sister organization to our nonprofit. And that lobbying organization now has a project called Right to Refuse. And we're tracking all of the hundreds of bills in the United States that are protecting our rights to make our own health decisions in the face of health emergencies. So been quite a journey.
Yeah, you guys have accomplished a lot. So just to recap, you started with Minnesota and creating that law that you're calling a safe harbor law that now exists in the state of Minnesota that carves out an exception to the practice of medicine, if you will, for unlicensed individuals, which can include people like coaching. It can include, as you mentioned, people who maybe practice yoga or other types of unlicensed healing professions, and gives them safety from being accused of unlicensed practice of medicine.
Right.
And you've been able to pass similar safe harbor laws in how many other states?
So now there's 11 states with some type of practitioner exemption safe harbor laws. We don't go into that state and pass them. We actually take questions and from people in that state, and then we go in and mentor and guide them and coach them through the legislative process. So we work very closely with a group, but we require there be a group at the ground at the Capitol in that state before we work with anybody.
And who might those groups be in each state?
So all of those groups are listed on our website. If you go to the National Health Freedom Action website, you will see an interactive state map, and it'll show, if you click on your state, it'll say we don't have a group here, or we do have a group here. This is the group. This is the bill they're moving. So this year, the 4 states that introduced safe harbor, none of them have passed yet. Iowa, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, and North Dakota. There's a very strong group in Oregon working. There's one getting ready in Michigan to go. There's, so it's just a process of whatever the citizens are going to work for, then we will meet with them every week and coach them. And oftentimes we travel, we testify, we draft language for them, we draft amendments, and we give them talking points, and just help them because they're learning just like we learned.
Yes. So, but if there's a state that doesn't have a group, what kind of individuals, or are we talking about? I haven't actually gone onto the map and clicked on the state
that's okay.
to get a flavor for the types of groups that are actually helping get these bills introduced.
Most of the time, it's people that have never gone to the Capitol, don't know anything about legislative activity, but just want to make sure they have their practitioner, or they heard somebody got shut down and they want to change the law. And they call us and say, help, what do I do? I don't know anything about this. And so we're basically teachers of regular citizens. And sometimes it's an already formed group that wants to take it forward. Sometimes it's just 3 citizens, like Maine just passed theirs 2 years ago or 1 year ago. And it was 5 homeopaths that wanted to set up a clinic, and they knew they couldn't without that safe harbor.
Nice.
And
okay.
They got together and we taught them how to pass bills, and they passed their bill.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the Saunders case for a moment, because what always interests me when I'm talking to my clients, who are usually, many of them are not licensed practitioners, many of them are health coaches, health and wellness coaches, is the legal risk that they may be accused of the unlicensed practice of some profession, usually medicine or dietetics or psychology, for example. And I often tell them, hey, what the biggest risk isn't necessarily from your clients, because they usually love you. The biggest risk is probably going to be from other licensed professionals, or maybe other people who are, consider themselves a competitor of yours, who don't like what you're doing because you're taking business away from them, and they would make the complaint. So in the case of Saunders, do you know how that case even came to be? Like how the government, the licensing board, even was paying attention to what this farmer was doing? Because I assume nobody was even hurt.
Right. The Saunders case was a very political case embedded in research issues. So the people who invented, they were doing the technique with dairy cattle were from the University of Minnesota and the vet school. And so these experts that we had and that were part of the trial were part of the history of colostrum research and its impact on health. And so they were doing a lot of research on colostrum in Minnesota. In fact, one of the doctors, a PhD, had started his own dairy herd up in northern Minnesota in Roseville, and he had figured out how to work with his cattle with strep A to get the colostrum so that it was called hyperimmune colostrum, and he had it for sale in grocery stores in the cities because it was helping people with arthritis. And so, arthritis has a lot to do with strep A. and people were getting well eating the colostrum. And even there was a journal entry in the Minnesota legislature um, regarding the hyperimmune colostrum and how wonderful of a healing modality it was for people with arthritis, including some young person that had gotten over acute arthritis. So there was history behind colostrum, dairy cows, and colostrum research. When you're talking about just the current research on mRNA and all of the current hubbubaloo about genetic stuff, the colostrum therapy is colostrum is the first milk of dairy cows when they have a baby calf. And that colostrum, those few days of colostrum, helps the calf program its immune system for whatever environment the mom was in. And so you can impact the content of colostrum by the environment of what the host is exposed to. And that knowledge was very important. And I think there was political grabs for the research that was done on that. And they knew about the farmer, and he was just a farmer doing it. He wasn't in a laboratory doing it.
So there wasn't necessarily somebody who reported the farmer to the licensing board.
Well, you don't have access to who reported it, but most likely it was agency people. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
There was when the first trial first started, the prosecutors put a notice out to find victims, but they couldn't find any. I think there was one that came forward, and then it never panned out, so there was no victims.
Yeah. So that does confirm that most of the time.
And one of the county people that was involved in the case refused to be involved because his wife had been cured with the immune colostrum. So it was definitely a political case, and Congressman Vidal was dying of Lyme disease, and he had quit being a congressman. He went home back to Iowa. Very well loved congressman. And he went back home, and somebody back home told him, hey, there's this farmer in southern Minnesota that might be able to help you. And when he got better, he was so freaked out. He just went, why doesn't everybody know about this? Mm-hmm. And so he started the National Institute of Health Complementary and Alternative Medicine office for that reason. And then Herb Saunders got arrested, and Berkeley was very, very angry about Herb being arrested. And so he came to testify at the trial and stuff. But like I said, a lot of our witnesses were not allowed to testify that they had been cured.
Yes.
Because it wasn't relevant to the law of practice of medicine.
Yes. And that's one of the most aggravating parts, is that it's so narrowly focused on your activity and not on the outcome. That is very frustrating.
Right.
So
we got 2 hung juries, and then we went and changed the law in Minnesota, and that's kind of the launching pad for national 20.
Yes. And your goal is to get those safe harbor laws passed in all 50 states.
Yeah, we want to support that passing in all 50 states. We think it's really, really important for the human race to acknowledge that it is part of the inherent quality of humans to heal each other, that they should never be reprimanded for healing each other, no matter how they do it. If they're hurting somebody, that's a different question. And in the law, it says you can't cause imminent risk of harm to a person, and they should be able to sue. But in terms of just offering healing services, that is part of being human. And we need to protect that so that it doesn't become a technological activity hired and funded and dominated by technology.
Yes. And so many of the clients for my law firm, they are in a position where they have some really useful knowledge and skills that they want to offer. And, if without having this safe harbor law in effect in all 50 states, but only now, right now in 11 states, these practitioners, many of whom don't have a license, are limited in what they can do. And that's, they come to us to try to figure out what are those limitations and how can they offer their knowledge and their skills without creating a lot of legal risk for what they want to do. And so I thought it was really important to have you on this podcast to give those individuals who are out there wanting to help, wanting to heal, wanting to serve their fellow humans, what can be done on more on an advocacy level to change the laws so that the environment in which you practice is more friendly to what you want to do. And so
I think when you go to the legislators say, we're not shutting these people down. We don't need to change that law. But I always say, if you're working under that law and you know that somebody could knock on your door and shut you down the next day, that's not a good law. You want the laws to reflect the reality of your situation. So the legislators, they might be more prone to changing the law if somebody got shut down, but sometimes they're just lackadaisical. They decide, we don't really need that. We don't need to change that law. But I insist we change that law because it reflects the culture. And if you're a practitioner working in fear because you think you're going to get shut down because you're not in a free state, that's a terrible risk to take financially and to your soul in terms of being afraid to practice.
Right.
I just think it's really, the deal is that they're not shutting people down, but those laws on the books are making a chilling effect. And the other thing that happens is that turf wars between these practitioner groups, like a conventionally trained person might look down on an unlicensed person because they're not doing something that they were trained to do in a conventional medical setting. Mm-hmm. However, they have a gift that they might want to share, but since it's not conventionally part of the medical system, the medical people may turn them in because they're not doing something that they consider as, they might think it's fraud, ripping people off and stuff like that. So people could still get sued for fraud. That's always true for a medical person and a non-medical person. But I think that climate of this looking down upon anything that's not from the conventional medical mindset is part of the road we are traveling now. People are getting more conscious. They're realizing that what they do eat really does affect them, or what their environment is like really affects them, or do they have a stand-up desk or a sit-down desk, or do they, it's like people, there are many healers that want to just help people have a happy, healthy life, and how to deal with the stress of all that they're living through. So I think that the coaches and the homeopaths that have time to spend with people talking about their life, like a doctor might not have time more than 10 or 15 minutes to be with them, and they have these tools that they can give them. But I think that the healers of the world they need to all be freed up. And then the other thing is that in the bills that we're passing, we make sure that the consumer or the citizen wanting that help knows who's in front of them. So the law says you have to say what your name is, what your profession is. Even if you had 2 weeks training in homeopathy, you have to say I have 2 weeks training in homeopathy or whatever, so that they know who's in front of them. And that's not really true for medical people. You could go to a medical doctor and get surgery, and that doctor might have only done 2 surgeries, but you don't know if they've done 2 or 5,000 surgeries.
That is true.
You're counting on the medical system and the licensing programming of that person to have dealt with that system and to be able to effectively give you a drug that's not going to kill you.
Mhm.
But you really don't know that. But in the unlicensed people, there's not, that structure's not there. So there are the mandatory disclosures that you say, this is who I am, this is what my training is, this is what I have to offer. It's up to you whether you take it or not. And then there's in the law, you can't pose a imminent risk of harm to that person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do want to mention, though, you said that, a legislator isn't likely to do anything because no one's getting shut down. But that isn't quite true. Granted, there haven't been many cases, but there have been some cases where an unlicensed person
Right.
has been shut down. I can think of the nutritional coach in Florida. I think there was also one in
Right.
Mississippi.
Right. I think when I was doing it, the first case I read was the Hins case in Iowa, where a naturopath was giving a talk on nutrition and said that garlic was good for you. And there was an undercover agent in the room, and the undercover agent said, should I use garlic if my kid, has an ear infection? And the teacher said yes, and that teacher went to jail for 5 years.
Just because they said yes to the
They
question
made a recommendation.
in an educational setting.
It was an educational setting, but it was a question about what I should do.
Mhm.
You can have education and teach all day long, but if somebody asks you, what should I do? You start having that patient-client relationship, and then you're
Yes.
recommending healing someone. So yeah, I read up on a lot of those cases 20 years ago. They were prevalent, and it happens. It's not real often, but I always tell the legislators, you wouldn't want to work under that bill. And, right now there's a legislator, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's 3 legislators, Iowa, Connecticut, and North Dakota. And those legislators all have used alternative health. And in Wisconsin, they were protective of their unlicensed practitioners. And that's why they came forward to take the bill.
Mhm. Yeah, well, that's my state, Wisconsin, and the governor decided not to. Well, he vetoed that.
They
That-
vetoed our bill. Yeah.
Yes. And there may be some political reasons for that in our state. So yeah, it's true that there aren't many actions against unlicensed people, but there are enough to cause concern
Mhm.
for those who don't have a license and want to help improve the health and wellness of their clients. One takeaway I think I could grab from that story you just told about the naturopath in Iowa who went to jail for 5 years because they, in an educational session, answered a question that yes, you should use garlic to help your child. Don't do that. Unless you're in maybe a state where there's a safe harbor. But even then, if you're in an educational setting, a group seminar, and you're giving people your knowledge about whatever angle it is that you have in health and wellness, steer away from answering tailored questions that are trying to get tailored advice and recommendations from you. Instead, always just say, I'm here to provide information. And if you want tailored advice, you need to refer them to a licensed professional or somebody who is able to give that. As tempting as it might be, don't do it. Don't do it. So how can people get more involved with what you're doing? I mean, if after listening to you today and this podcast, people feel like, oh, this makes sense. And, I want to help, I want to advance this cause. I want to get involved in my state to get a safe harbor law passed in my state, or learn more about, from like-minded individuals, maybe attend the Health Freedom Congress, which is next month, right? In September, where you can convene with other like-minded individuals and learn from them? How can people learn more and do more?
Well, thank you for asking. I think the best thing is to go to our website, and the National Health Freedom Coalition website is nationalhealthfreedom.org. And the Action website has a link on that website too, but the Action website is nationalhealthfreedomaction.org. And so both of those websites have links to our projects. The Congress is a project of National Health Freedom Coalition, the 501c3. The Congress is, we have done it 12 times. This is our 13th time, and it brings all leaders from around the country together to really collaborate and discuss resolutions and talk about the freedom movement, the health freedom movement in general, and vision for the future. That's coming up in September, and we're just really excited to be organizing it again after 4 years of not having one. So we're pretty excited. And then the Action organization, there's a special project there, nationalhealthfreedomaction.org. And that special project is the Right to Refuse project. So we're tracking all the bills that are helping us deal with mandates to protect people's right to make their own choices about healthcare, whether it's, declining a vaccine or a masking mandate or whatever it is. We're supporting the bills that say we need to protect people's right to their bodily autonomy. So those two organizations, National Health Freedom Coalition and National Health Freedom Action, both have websites, and there's an email and I'd be happy to write back to people, help them get a group together in their state if they want to start a safe harbor effort, or link them to people we might know in that state where they could work on something like that. It'd be great. We'd love to help. We really want healers to be free to practice.
So people can contact you through the website, the nationalhealthfreedom.org website, the contact form, and
and our administrator forwards all of those to us so that we can get back to people and get their private emails, and then I can send my email too.
And people can donate too.
That's great. That would be great. We're nonprofits, so donations are very much appreciated because that's how we survive. We are totally funded by donations. We've kept it up for 22 years, and we are so appreciative of anybody that donates to our organization because that keeps us going.
Right. And so because you are a 501c3, it's a tax deductible donation. And there, I think I saw a donate button right on your, I think I saw a donate button right on your website. And that'd be great if people feel encouraged to contribute that way. I think the work that you're doing is very, very important for the wellness industry and wellness practitioners. And so I hope that you can continue doing this important work and helping the broader cause of creating an environment that allows more freedom to practice what people want to practice, and of course not doing any harm doing it.
Great. Thank you for having me on the show, and I'm delighted to be your first podcaster. Very big honor. Thank you.
Well, I was so happy that when you said yes, and so you're a perfect first guest. Thank you, Diane.
Good luck with this going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.